This video has been sponsored by Autodesk, a design and make company, and Raycon.
So I'm moving, and I was looking for a new dining table. I wanted something from like Ming Dynasty inspired, and I found this beautiful little table. And then I scrolled down and I saw sold for $250,000. I could make this. Let's go to the lumber store. Okay, so my plan until I came to the lumber store was to do this out of walnut. But then I got here and I saw the most beautiful piece of mahogany I have ever seen. So I'm pivoting. That is gonna glow with finish on it. The one downside is that it is a foot shorter than I really needed it to be, because I wanted a 5-foot table, but it's a 14-foot plank. So it's actually gonna be like 4 feet 4 inches at most. But it'll be a little wider because it's like 10 inches wide. So irregularly shaped table, but that's okay.
In order for the whole tabletop to be cohesive, I wanted to cut them all from one piece of wood. So for this giant piece of mahogany, I just wanted to cut it into 3 pieces, like equally sized pieces, and then just edge glue them together.
Unfortunately, I don't have a jointer because I honestly don't really need one. But my former neighbor and friend Steve, who I befriended when I lived on his street, has an amazing wood shop, and we tool trade all the time. So I'm gonna head over there and joint these boards.
Steve and I played with the boards a bit to see which orientation we liked the best, and once we had it, we marked it, and then we clamped it up dry, and that would tell us like which of the boards actually needed to be jointed on the edges and which of them were fine. And it actually, one of the seams was totally fine, and we just ran the other one through the jointer really quick. And to be completely honest, I'm probably never gonna buy a jointer because having the excuse to go over to Steve's now and then is such a joy. Steve has been doing this for, a little bit longer than me, and he is just such a wealth of knowledge and ideas and information, and going over there and running through how I'm gonna build a project or just bouncing ideas off of him is one of my favorite ways, like one of my favorite parts of projects. And then after a couple rounds of ping pong with Steve, I brought those boards home and glued them up. And now that I knew the dimensions I would get from the tabletop, it was time to really design the rest of the table. So I hopped into Fusion 360, which is my favorite CAD software right now and also happens to be one of the sponsors of today's video. So thank you, Autodesk, and got cracking. I only had 1 week to build this table before I had to move out of my shop forever. So it was really important that I knew exactly how this table was gonna go together from the get-go. In just under an hour, I was able to model it just how I wanted to look with that like classic Ming design feel and get a cut list that will let me build as quickly as possible. And for the drop leaves on the apron, I exported a DXF right from Fusion 360 to use as a template and save myself a bunch of time sketching onto wood. Honestly, I have been integrating Fusion more and more into my workflow over the last year, and it has been so helpful with saving time on projects. So check out the link in my description for more information on Fusion 360 by Autodesk, a design and make company. And look, I could even skin it in wood. I then grabbed my pseudo track saw, which might actually be my least favorite tool in the shop. I just find it so irritating to use for such little gain. And trimmed the edges up straight, gave it a quick sanding, and then there was a little gap in the lumber that I knew when I bought it, except I loved this piece of wood so much I bought it anyway, and I didn't want to lose the length. So I decided to just patch it with some fixed wood, which is an epoxy putty by Bodiltooth. And that curing apparently severely borked the exposure settings on my camera, but they magically come back for this next shot and I don't remember fixing them. I grabbed the narrowest piece of the African mahogany that I purchased and got to cutting down the legs. And I don't have access to like a tree trunk the way that the ancient Chinese probably did. So to get those really nice, chunky, round legs, I'm gonna cut these down to length, rip them to width, and then glue them together into a square, and then plane them, and then I can route them into that circle shape. And I think you won't be able to really tell there's a seam. So this is definitely the part I've been procrastinating, but I am trying to now draw the apron onto this board. And I just met, this board can do the entire apron, which is nice. So the other board I can save for later. And I did laser cut a template of the little tongue thing, but
but it's still gonna be a challenge.
So admittedly, this is replicating that ancient Ming Dynasty table in looks only. I did a little bit of poking around, and like some of the tables were built using mortise and tenon joinery. Some of them were built using half laps. Some of them were built using complicated ancient Chinese joinery techniques that I don't have the time, knowledge, or skill to do. But in the end, I think that it'll look pretty close and be a nice callback to like the artisans of that time. I don't know if you can hear them, but the neighbor kids are playing red light, green light right now. And I'm just like soaking up every last minute of having them. But unfortunately, I did have to put hearing protection on for the tools, not the children. With my apron pieces completely drawn out, I just got to cutting them out. So I started on the chop saw, cut all of the pieces separate, and then I moved over actually to the drill press so that I could get a perfect, like the same radius on every single piece. And then once those were done, I took it all over to the bandsaw to cut the last of it. Oh, and a really fun bandsaw safety trick that I learned from Steve, especially in like when I'm teaching other people to use my bandsaw, that I always point out is never lean forwards into the tool. So you can see here that like I am leaning forwards to see the blade, but my bottom left foot is stepping all the way forwards, and that's holding all of my weight. So I'm not putting any weight on the machine, because you want to make sure that if you trip or if the piece, like the wood changes in density or something, you're never going to fall towards the blade. You're holding your own weight. I have good news. So last night I went to bed thinking I had screwed this up because they don't match. And I was like, oh my God, I cut one of them too short. And to be honest, I am like really stressed out, really tired and pretty burned out because I'm trying to get this done before I move. By the time you're watching this video, I will probably have already moved. And I looked at it again and I measured it, and it's actually, I just have to cut this little excess part out. Like, I measured it wrong in the direction where I can just trim it a little. Whew. Whew. This is why sleeping on things is a good thing sometimes. And with that fiasco resolved, it was time to get cracking on the legs. I'll be putting this table together using mortise and tenon joinery, which is one of, I think, the oldest forms of joinery. It's like 7,000 years old. And it's basically, you cut a rectangular hole in one piece, that's your mortise, and then you cut a same shaped rectangular like tongue in another piece called the tenon, and then you slide those together and you can glue them, you can throw a dowel through them. I'll just be gluing them here, and it's just a super strong joint, and it looks very clean. So what I'm doing here is I am measuring and marking out where my mortises will get cut into the table legs. I'm coming to terms with the fact that what I'm doing here is just brute force woodworking. So am I doing things correctly? But I'm trying to just get things done as quickly as possible with as much sanity as possible. Will it be perfect? Absolutely not. Will it function as a table? Probably. Will it look nice? Hopefully. Sometimes, that's the only goal. Want to know something funny? Over the winter, I didn't use this, my like drill press clamp hold down things for like a month because there was a dead moth on it, and I just wanted to keep convincing myself that the moth was just sleeping. For hogging out material on my mortises, I typically use a drill press, although in hindsight, as I watch this footage, it probably would have been more efficient to use a router. I just don't have a fence on my router table, so I didn't. But what I ended up doing here was just clamping a piece of wood as a fence on the drill press so that I could chug along. So I don't know who I'm trying to fool, but I just got to hogging out a ton of material for those mortises.
This is tedious as heck. I need music.
Luckily for me, this video is sponsored by Raycon, who is disrupting the electronics industry by designing premium wireless audio for half the price, without compromise. They're doing things differently than other brands out there. From the way they design their products to the way they price them, Raycon prioritizes their customer experience from start to finish. Raycon's everyday earbuds look, feel, and sound better than ever. With optimized gel tips for the perfect in-ear fit, these earbuds are super comfy and they will not budge. And helpful for me while I'm moving and everything is in boxes, they offer 8 hours of playtime and a 32-hour battery life.
All right, back at it, but with jams this time. Make it more tolerable.
Click the link in the description box below or go to buyraycon.com/Xyla to get 15% off your Raycon purchase, plus free shipping. One of my favorite features of these earbuds is how smooth and easy it is to talk on the phone. Calling my friends and loved ones on my Raycons while I packed my house was exactly how I got through the move with my sanity in check. And remember, supporting my sponsors supports my channel. Many thanks to Raycon, and be sure to visit buyraycon.com/Xyla for 15% off your order, plus free shipping. Just look how quick you can hog out those mortises with Raycons. To finish those mortises, I scored a line that my chisel can follow, like really scored it, and then I just chiseled straight down and took out all the tiny little triangles to create a nice rectangle. And voila! A mortise and tenon joint.
I have been so sluggish and unmotivated, but today it is warm out, it is sunny, and I'm gonna make some progress.
I started by cleaning up all of the bandsaw cuts on the belt sander, and then it was time to cut all of the tenons for my mortise and tenon joinery. And I did that on the table saw. I almost always do tenons on the table saw by just setting the table saw height to the depth that I want to cut, and then just running it over and over again across the blade. This is kind of a silly thing, but I just used the butt of my featherboard here as a stop fence for all of these cuts. It just felt like the fastest way to clamp something to my table saw really quick. But obviously I know that the featherboard is backwards. I'm not using it as featherboard. Flipping it over was a giant pain in the butt because I hadn't really thought through how there was no flat surface to put against the fence. So I ended up grabbing 2 of the planed table legs, so I knew that they were perfectly square, and putting those against the fence as a gap so that I could still run my tenon through. And then I went through with the same technique for these smaller pieces, making smaller tenons as well. And for the bottoms, I just did it quick and dirty and careful on the bandsaw and cleaned it up with a chisel. I know there's better ways of doing it, but this was the fastest way. With the tenons roughed out, I just cleaned up the face cheeks with a chisel just to make them fit nice and snug in the mortises.
Wow, who did this? Terrible.
And none of these joints were perfect. I didn't do the world's best job, so they all involved a little bit of customization to get them to fit snug. And so I just paired, instead of them all being identical, they all got paired and labeled so that they would all go with, every mortise would be matched with the same tenon, always.
I've been putting off this one because I did a very bad job drilling out the mortise. Look at this. Who did this? I clean and cruise here. Oh.
I was able to get both the shorter sides of the apron and the stretcher bars out of the same piece of mahogany that I got the rest of the apron from. And so I just used one of the existing pieces to measure the distance between the fence and the blade, and then I ripped them all down. And then the worst part of working with miters, which is cutting the miters. For these shorter pieces, I clamped the piece to the fence because I like my fingers intact. And then for the longer pieces, I was able to hold them against the fence. But this is how the corners stay looking clean and crisp. And the last piece I needed to fabricate was the dowels that run from the table leg to the table leg on the shorter sides of the table. And no, those are not necessary structurally, but I think that that is like the visual tie together for the whole table to make it really look like it's from the Ming Dynasty. And also I think it adds a layer of delicateness to the overall look that I really, really like. So to make those, I just cut square pieces, and then I used a round over bit and turned them into circles. And while I was there, I also rounded over the rest of the apron while poor Karis got roped into sanding all of the dowels smooth in the background of this shot. While I was marking the spots to drill holes for the dowels to slide into, I remembered that I actually hadn't cut the mortises or tenons yet for the stretcher bars. So I flipped those legs over and marked those as well. And just like the other mortise and tenons, I did the mortises on the drill press and then chiseled them out, and then I did the tenons on the table saw. My genius self cut these tenons an inch deep instead of half an inch deep. So I have to recut the whole piece. So I just figured that out. And then I went inside, I ate 3 cookies, and then we broke 400,000 subscribers. So thank you all. And now I'm back here dealing with this. All right. So I gritted my teeth, sucked it up, cut brandy new stretcher bars that were the right length, and I test fit them, and they were still the right length. So I gave them the same round over that the rest of the apron had, and I could move on and face the scariest router bit I've ever used to round over these table legs. This is an 1.5" radius bit, so I did it in lots and lots and lots of tiny passes in order to avoid tear out, burning, and the thing I was most scared of, which is like flinging the piece across the room at somebody else or dragging my fingers into the router. So I just took it really nice and light with all these tiny passes. I raised the bit probably 4 or 5 times over the course of rounding these over. So it took a really long time, and it was a lot of work, but super worth it. I finished them all up with a sander, and at this point I actually took them from 60 all the way to 220 grit for the final sanding pass, because it's a lot easier to sand something like this before it's assembled. So while I'm assembling, I'm just going to do a really good job to not get glue all over the place, and then I won't have to sand it again. With all of the pieces sanded up to 220, we got the flattest surface together that we could to dry fit, and the floor of this shop was really not flat, so the table saw with the outfeed table was kind of the best that we could do. Covered it with just a drop cloth and got to gluing it together. All right, glue time. This is the way to do that. I decided to glue it together in 2 batches. The first would be the side pieces and the stretchers, and that's the structural part of the table that I really needed to also get square and really flat. So we glued that up, and then once that was dry, I went in and added the rest of the apron, which is much more decorative. With the bases glue drying, it was time to grab that monster of a tabletop and cut the bottom chamfer into it. Now this is like really, really common in modern woodworking. It helps make a solid wood top look a lot lighter and more open, but it was also a thing in the Ming Dynasty too, so like really, they started it. And then for the top, I wanted to leave it square, except that I didn't want it sharp. So I just used a really small roundover bit to break the edge evenly. And then she just got sanded all the way up to 220, and she was ready for final assembly and finish. To attach the top to the base, I just used these really simple figure 8 fasteners. So you take a Forstner bit and kind of like countersink a circle that you can hammer the figure 8 base into. Pop a screw in there, and then like when you put it on the tabletop, you can just screw it right in. So nothing in the Ming Dynasty was particularly shiny, so I knew I needed a satin finish, and usually I would go for like Gleam Satin or Lust Matte by Total Boat, except that because I was in the middle of moving, I was actually completely out of varnish. I stopped ordering stuff because I needed to move. So the morning of, I actually ran to the store and all they had was Rubio Monaco, and I was actually really excited to try it because I've never used it before. I've heard really good things, and it's a 2-part oil-based finish that you only need 1 coat. So I thought I would give it a try, and I really like the way it came out. Now, Rubio Monaco definitely encourages you to use this pad to apply the finish, but I ended up just liking pouring a little puddle and using a squeegee better. I think it was easier, and then I just went over it with the pad at the end to get all the excess and like really rub the finish in. Now, I had to move this table to the new house just 24 hours after this finish went on, so I had to do it all in one go. So I put finish on the bottom of the tabletop, and then I did the table leg area, screwed them together, finished the legs, and then flipped it over and did the tabletop. It's a little convoluted, but it worked.